Welcome back to NewsX World. I'm Asuma Katauka and you're watching Future X, where we explore the trends, challenges, and innovations shaping the future of our society. Today, we're diving deep into the mindset of a generation at the crossroads of awareness and anxiety. Gen Z, known for being the most informed young people in history, they're facing unprecedented mental health challenges. Social media, constant information, and global discussions on identity and well-being have created a paradox: more awareness, yet more anxiety. To discuss this complex issue, we are joined by Dr. Aditi Govitrikar. She's a supermodel, former Mrs. World, a physician, and a mental health advocate. She's the first Indian woman to win the Mrs. World title in 2001. From 1997 to 2004, Ms. Govitrikar remained the only Indian supermodel with both a medical doctor and psychologist qualification. Dr. Aditi has been at the forefront of raising awareness about young people's emotional well-being, and she's here to help us understand what Gen Z is really experiencing. Thank you very much for joining us, Dr. Govitrikar. Thank you very much. Now, going in, Gen Z has grown up with unprecedented access to information, constant news, social media, mental health, vocabulary, and global conversations about identity, trauma, and well-being. Yet multiple surveys across countries show rising levels of anxiety, loneliness, and emotional distress among young people. How do you explain this paradox of a generation that is more aware of mental health than any before it, yet appears to be struggling more with it?
Yes, you're absolutely right. So Gen Z has grown up hearing about anxiety, trauma, burnout, and well-being all the time. They know the words, but knowing the words does not mean that they automatically make life easier. You see, they're constantly exposed to bad news, global problems, and emotional content. But they don't really have a real control over their own future or money or stability, right? That is not there. uh, just because you know about these things, that does not give you that kind of sense of stability, and that creates stress. So instead of awareness helping them feel better, it sometimes makes them feel overloaded and helpless. So in simple terms, if you think about it, they understand mental health, they understand these terms, and they actually do get what it means, but living in the conditions does not necessarily make them capable of handling these things. So in that sense, it makes mental well-being much harder for them.
Thank you for sharing that in-depth analysis. And now, Dr. Aditi, for most of Gen Z, social media is not an occasional activity, but the primary space for socializing, self-expression, and validation. Algorithms reward visibility, comparison, and constant engagement. From a psychological perspective, how does growing up inside algorithm-driven platforms shape self-worth, identity formation, and emotional regulation?
So for Gen Z, basically, social media is not any extra, uh, extra thing in their life. It's not like an extracurricular activity or something that they go to when they have time. It is where their life happens. So friends, validation, identity for them all live on social media. Now, the problem is that social media rewards likes, views, and attention. So slowly, self-worth has become numerical. It's counted in numbers. If people react, you feel good. If they don't click that like button, you start doubting yourself immediately. And we've seen in our recent past that there have been people who have even committed suicide because their post did not do as well as they thought. It has become that serious. So what is happening is identity now in today's day and age is being shaped in public. Every post can be judged. It can be whether this friend liked it, that friend liked it, whether my senior liked it. So all these things they're constantly scrolling to check. Now that makes people careful, anxious, and afraid of getting it wrong. So emotionally constant scrolling and comparisons leave very little space to calm down, reflect, or just be bored, which so boredom is an important part of shaping who you are. So that is very, very important, that we don't allow ourselves to just let go, just to, none of us, all of us are actually, forget Gen Z, but even we, we don't allow ourselves to get bored anymore. We don't daydream. We don't, introspect. We don't sit with ourselves. The minute you get time, you pick up the phone and you start scrolling or you start messaging, thereby not allowing the brain to form that identity which is required to be formed, especially for Gen Z. Because early on, it would happen in private. You were gradually formed. You formed your rational thinking, your judgment, your analytical powers, but now it is all public.
Interesting. And as you know, you mentioned afraid people, Gen Zs are afraid of getting things wrong. They're sensitive towards it. So young people today encounter highly polished versions of success, beauty, and happiness in their screens every day, often without seeing the failures or struggles behind them. Does this create a distorted benchmark for what a normal life should look like, and how does that distortion feed anxiety and low self-esteem?
See, what happens is when you're constantly living your life on, so it is pretty much real life instead of real life, right? So constantly you're looking at perfect bodies, success stories, happy couples, and exciting lives everywhere, whether it is travel or makeup or clothes or styling, everything is just so polished. But what the realization that what they are not seeing is the struggle behind it. And every single human being in life has to go through ups and downs. However, the social media creates this kind of a bubble where it appears that I am the one who's struggling, nobody else is. I am messed up, I am uncertain, I am, anxious, but everybody else appears so perfect. Everything is so good for them. So why am I going through this? And anyway, if you're going through a down, these emotions are going to happen to you. But in addition, if you're constantly comparing with others, it enhances your insecurities, your panic, your stress level. So that has become a way of life. So this comparison constantly with other people, that is causing a lot of issues for Gen Z.
You know, as you mentioned, that constant comparison is causing a lot of issues for Gen Z. Previous generation often lacked mental health vocabulary, but were sometimes described as more resilient in the face of hardship, while Gen Z, by contrast, speaks openly about emotions but is often labeled fragile. Is this a misunderstanding of what resilience looks like today, or has something fundamentally changed in young people's capacity to cope?
So I think it's a bit of both, but it's mostly unfair, I would say. Earlier generations did not talk about feelings. They pushed through, stayed silent, and survived. So that looked like strength, but we have to realize a lot of suppression of emotions do show up in unhealthy ways later on. So psychosomatic illnesses or diseases is something that is connected to your suppressed emotions, and that is what the earlier generation suffered through or went through. Now, where Gen Z is concerned, yes, they are talking openly about emotions, which is actually healthy. Uh, but resilience is not just being aware and just talking, right? It is also about learning how to sit with discomfort and not fall apart. Now, this is something that is not being taught to them. And self teaching is also not possible because they just have the screen all the time with them, right? So, they're not taught how to cope, and though they are hyper aware, it is about the capacity again. So it is not a weakness, I would say it's a missing skill.
Right. And now Gen Z has pushed forward conversations about gender fluidity, body positivity, and challenging traditional roles, which many see as liberating. At the same time, navigating identity has become more complex. So, building on your answer earlier, you mentioned they need to learn how to cope, or that's what they're missing. Does having more choices and fewer fixed categories reduce pressure, or does it create new forms of uncertainty and anxiety?
Again, it does both, because having more freedom, there is a, choice paradox that happens here. That okay, I have to choose between two things, A and B. I know I have a choice of A and B, but if I have a choice of 200 things, then it can cause a lot of confusion in my mind, right? So you have a choice, but there is a paradox of that which one to go forward to. Or if I choose number 49, I will keep wondering if I should have chosen 83 and things like that. Whereas it's A and B, okay, it's either this or that. So that kind of creates this issue for Gen Z. Now, having more freedom around gender, body image, and roles can feel empowering, but it also means that there are fewer clear paths. Young people have to figure out who they are on their own and keep questioning it. So that can feel confusing and stressful. Human beings need freedom, but they also need some structure. So that is an important part to understand, that without that balance, choice itself can become very, very overwhelming.
Thank you for sharing that important message. And Dr. Aditi, if we look at the bigger picture, technology, culture, parenting, education, and economic uncertainty, are we witnessing a temporary crisis of adaptation, or the emergence of a long-term mental health challenge that will define this generation?
See, right now it is pretty much an adjustment phase. The world has changed way too fast than we human beings can keep up. Of course, we are only the reason why it has changed. So, be it technology, culture, work, money, just everything, right? If schools, families, workplaces, and social media don't adapt, then these mental health struggles could last for a very long time. So, but if we build better systems and support, Gen Z could actually grow into a very emotionally intelligent and aware and capable generation. So they have it in them. It's just that we need to be, as in senior, the earlier generations need to make sure that all that we learned in life, and keeping in mind that we know technology, right? We, our generation, the older generation, the parental generation, they are also well aware of the technology. So we need to help Gen Z understand this point, that sure, you can live on your reels, but real life is and can be very different.
And Dr. Aditi, last but not least, what would a healthier version of Gen Z's future realistically look like?
Well, I will say that it is not going to be stress free. It's not like that for anybody ever, right? It's not going to be a stress free life, but yes, it can be a more balanced one. A healthier future would mean learning how to use phones without being controlled by them. So right now, if I feel that, oh, I'm a slave to my phone, it should be the other way around. You should get the phone or the technology to work for you, and not the other way around. Secondly, learning how to calm emotion and not just talk about it. So enrich yourself with those tools and skills to handle the emotions so that you can seek a balance. Then redefining success beyond money and mainly perfection. That is very, very important. Of course, more real life connections and not just online validation, because if you go out to eat, you see that most of the people sitting on a table at a restaurant are on their phones instead of talking to one another, connecting with each other, sharing things. That is very, very crucial. So, a little more stability and hope about work and the future is also important, that we need to understand this, right? Um, most importantly, we need to stop asking what's wrong with Gen Z. And we need to start asking what kind of world are we handing them? So I don't think Gen Z is broken. They are just reacting to a very intense world. And I mean that reaction I think to me actually makes sense.
Thank you very much, Dr. Aditi Rikar, for shedding light on these challenges and opportunities of Gen Z today. Thank you very much. With that, it's a wrap on this episode of Future X. For more insights into the trends shaping the future of our society, stay tuned on NewsX World.